Alright, so scanning film negatives has always been one of those things where I'm constantly experimenting and trying new things because software updates and just because of my preference for film, to be honest. So I'm always kind of taking new approaches to it, whether I'm using different settings, whether I'm going for less in the scanner and more in Photoshop and things like that. So it's always kind of just a give and take. So today I'm going to be walking through how to scan film negatives at home with the Epson Perfection V550. I'll take you through color and black and white, and also how to get your film borders, just in case you want those in the photos as well. So we're going to go ahead and start by opening up Epson Scan. Go ahead and make sure your scanner's on first, and then you can click refresh. Okay, so now that you have Epson Scan loaded up, this is Epson Scan 2. They recently updated it, I think, around the start of 2020, and in my opinion, it's not as good as the first software they had. There was a lot more advanced settings that you could use to make sure your whole roll was scanned at the same kind of color tone, but that's beside the point. We're just going to go over how to do it in Epson Scan 2. Let's go ahead and start with some black and white film. We'll go ahead and let's start with color film. I'll take you through the color 35mm process. And to start, I usually like to make sure your white background is taken off. And then I usually like to wipe down the scanner just to make sure there's nothing on it once I do start scanning. Today I'm going to be scanning old film negatives that I've already taken, so I'm not going to need to cut the photos or anything like that. But normally my process would be, after I clean down the scanner, I cut my negatives and then load them up onto the scanner bed. So to start, I'll show you how to scan it with the borders. Usually you'd be using one of these, which helps line everything up on the scanner and also just make sure your photo is right in the middle. But just as a preference thing, I usually like to scan the borders with the photo. So I'll go ahead and just place it on the scanner bed. That way you can get the full negative. To see which way you need to go, you'll need to go ahead and put it against the white backdrop, and you can see, Kodak Portra. And if you can read it, then you're looking at it the wrong way. So you'll need to turn it the opposite way, face that down, so that when the scanner scans it from this side, it looks up and it scans it the proper way rather than scanning the mirror image. So I'm gonna go ahead and scan it by lining it up in between these two lines so that it stays right in here. It's easy with 35mm film, but for 120 film, it's usually a bit harder because it takes up about the width, so you get more off to the edges and things like that. So it doesn't need to be perfect, but I'm just gonna leave it right in the center. And so moving into the software, you're gonna need to select what I have up here. You have photo mode. I don't have anything for scan settings, but make sure this is on transparency unit, not scanner glass, and make sure your document type is color negative film with 48-bit color. And then you can scan it whatever resolution you like. Today I'm gonna just scan it 600 to make it kind of a bit quicker. And then you can go ahead and change these. I'm gonna go ahead and just show a preview before I change the image format and file type and things like that. Alright, so now you can see the negatives, and this button right here is going to delete the old kind of squares you had cut out for the last ones. And I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag a square over it. And you can kind of manipulate your photo from here, but I'd rather zoom in and see it. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in right here. Alright, nice. So from here you can see the scan isn't perfect. All the colors aren't there and everything. And for me, this was always a big problem when you move it. If you get rid of some of the black, some of the colors will change actually. So this can kind of just play with your head because you don't know what exactly you need to do to get it perfect. So a lot of people I know, when they come in, they just start by clicking and dragging around. The best way for me is actually to go up to advanced settings, then click detailed adjustments. And then I like to use the histogram adjustment. Some people prefer tone correction, which I'll get into, but histogram, and then I like to push it to the farthest point over here, and then I also drag this one down to the furthest point here. That way you get a flat look, and then the middle slider is what you'll kind of use for almost as an exposure tool. And then in image adjustment, you can change colors, things like that, which I'll actually go ahead and brighten this up because it looks a little dark right now. And then you can also come into tone correction, and this is where you can get more brightness, more color to your negatives. Yeah, that looks like a good, nice vintage tone right there, so let's go ahead and scan it. I'm going to go ahead and just change this to test the negatives. Just go to 0. And I like to scan everything at TIFF just because it's a higher quality. And let's go ahead and pick a folder to put it in. Alright, so let's go ahead and scan. So there's the full scan at 600 dpi resolution. So it looks really nice. I think it's really good, but the color tone to me still looks a bit off. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of rework it a little bit. When you don't have the borders in it, it will definitely help you out with your color tones. The blacks and the yellows definitely take into a big effect. So what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and scan it with the regular scan settings that they had put on once I laid the file over the negative. And I'm gonna go ahead, I'll make a few color tone adjustments just because I think it could be a bit warmer and a little more red. I think that looks nice, so I'm gonna go ahead and scan that. Awesome, so the next one is scanned, and I think the color tone on this looks definitely better. You can see, this looks way flatter, almost looks like it hasn't been color graded or anything yet. And then this looks definitely more vivid, more bright. So there's definitely some pros and cons to capturing the film border, so definitely keep that in mind. You can also play with this in Photoshop so that you would be able to get this photo basically with this kind of border. That just takes a little bit more time in post-production. But that's good for the color negative. Let's go ahead and also scan a 120, a medium format film photo with the scanner as well. And I'll show you how to scan the borders for that too. So again, make sure your photo is face down on the scanner so that it's not mirrored when you go to scan it. Alright, and let's go ahead and check out the preview. Alright, awesome. So it's not perfectly lined up as you can see, but I think it's definitely good enough to get to negative and even with the film border. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this as well just to get some better detail. Alright, so now you're zoomed in and I can see that it's definitely overexposed, partially because of the black that I have left out. So I'm gonna just drag that in. It'll help with the color tone right off the bat. And next I'm gonna just pop the details adjustments open and kind of play around with these settings a little bit more. You can see that adds a bit more contrast and brings the colors right out. And then I'll just go ahead and also play with the color just a little bit. I try not to mess with these a lot because it definitely will change the film a lot. And I try and like to be as natural as possible, but I do think it helps for sure. So I think this looks good right now. So let's go ahead and scan this. Let's open that up, and that looks nice. That's awesome. Scanning 120 is definitely really rewarding because you get to see all the color tones. Seeing the border and everything with it after the full process is just really nice. So let's go ahead and I'll also show you how to just scan some stuff like this. One of the just the film borders, just in case you want to use it on any of your projects. You can go ahead and zoom in on that as well. The zoom feature is one of those things where you don't need to use it, but it definitely helps, especially when you're trying to get the colors right and trying to get all the details. So here you can see this is a nice film border that you could use for a lot of photo projects, anything like that. So I'll change the details adjustments because I think it's a little bit better. Yeah, it looks pretty cool though. Yeah, and now you can see some more of the detail in the fabric, I guess. I think that looks pretty cool. You could use that as a little film border kind of thing. So let's just go ahead and scan that. And so now I'm going to be going over how to scan some black and white film. So it's relatively the same exact process. The only difference is that you're going to have to change your settings on your scanner beforehand, which is not hard at all. Let's just go ahead into the main settings. Go ahead and click on 16-bit grayscale and click on black and white negative film. It's going to prompt you with that. Go ahead and click yes. And then go ahead and get your black and white film ready. Again, make sure your film is face down so that it's not mirror image. That looks about right. And let's get a preview. Perfect, so it's lined up, and let's go ahead and drag this so it's bigger. And let's go ahead and drag this open. Awesome, so this actually looks just a bit overexposed, but other than that, because it's black and white, the background isn't affecting it too much. I'll go ahead and close in on that just a little bit more. Now you already get some more contrast and detail in the highlights, and I'll just open up advanced settings and detailed adjustments again just to play with this to see if it affects it. I kind of like that low contrast, like hazy feel, and then pull this down to get more detail in the highlights. Now you can see, especially if you look on her forehead right here, you lose track of the highlights if this gets too far next to that peak. So I like to keep it as low as possible. And then it might look a bit flat and dull now, but in Photoshop, that's when I'll bring in kind of more brightness, because I think you gain more, or you obtain more highlight details doing it that way. But you can also change the middle slider. I think has a big effect on the photo. And I like that hazy look, but I like the contrast too, so I'll go ahead and leave it right there. And let's go ahead and scan this photo as well. Alright, so let's take a look. Perfect. So yeah, it does look a little dull and definitely not as bright as it should, but in Photoshop, that's when I'll do the kind of brightening effects. I think if you do it here, you definitely lose some color and some highlight detail, but let's go ahead and also scan this other photo just so you can get another example of black and white. Okay, so it looks a little bit overexposed right now, but let's go ahead and move the borders in. Alright, and detailed adjustments again. Let's go ahead and bring that slider down, and I'll bring this one up to make it a little bit brighter this time. So this is definitely a preference thing. I just want to show you how it kind of works so that you can see what the different kind of tools will do to your film negatives. They're definitely kind of pretty self-explanatory. You just got to play around with them a bit. Like I said before though, the one downside to all this is that the Epson Scan software does actually update quite a bit, so you're kind of stuck with always learning and adapting to their settings rather than being on your own terms. But I think all in all, scanning negatives with Epson Perfection V550 and the Epson Scan 2 is definitely a simple process that anybody can do once you get the scanner and the software. It just takes a bit of trial and error. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. But thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.